Vance H. Marchbanks, Jr., black flight surgeon, born 1905, died 1988. Vance H. Marchbanks, Jr. was a much-decorated Air Force flight surgeon who served in the military for 23 years. His combat mission work and bravery earned him several medals, including the Bronze Star and Air Force Commendation Medals. Marchbanks was one of the project physicians for Project Mercury, the United States' first manned spacecraft mission. He and 10 other physicians monitored the health of the astronauts by collecting medical flight data from them as they orbited Earth. This data enabled Marchbanks and others to determine the impact that spaceflight has on humans. Marchbanks, the second of two children, was born on January 12, 1905, at Fort Washakie, Wyoming, to Vance H. Marchbanks, Sr., a cavalry sergeant in Cali-Hatton. He received his bachelor's degree from the University of Arizona in 1931 and his medical degree from Howard University, Washington, D.C. in 1937. After graduating, Marchbanks worked for the Veterans Administration Hospital in Tuskegee, Alabama, until April of 1941, when he entered the Army Air Corps as a first lieutenant. At the time, medical officers who were in the Army Air Corps were considered part of the Army. Marchbanks was awarded the Bronze Star for his heroism while fighting in Italy in World War II. He advanced in the Air Force ranks and was assigned to the Air Force Hospital in Nagoya, Japan, as the Deputy Commander-in-Chief of the Professional Service. A year later, in 1955, his work there earned him a promotion to full colonel in the Medical Corps. Marchbanks wrote several papers about stress related to flying and combat fatigue, published in research journals and military manuals. While participating in a marathon, 10,600-mile, 22.5-hour nonstop flight from Florida to Argentina to New York, he discovered a marker for identifying fatigue in flight crew members. During the flight, Marchbanks measured the amount of adrenal hormone in blood and tissue samples taken from the crew members. He determined that a certain level indicated physical fatigue, a condition which often presages a fatal crash. Marchbanks received an Air Force Commendation Medal in November of 1957 for this research. He also received a medal for developing an oxygen mask tester, a device that reminds Air Force flight crew members to clean their oxygen masks frequently. His military record earned him 2 commendation medals, one in 1950 and another in 1958. By 1960, Marchbanks' work, his rating of Chief Flight Surgeon, with its prerequisite 1,500 flying hours and 15 years of flying status, and his research in aviation medicine qualified him as one of the 11 Air Force surgeons assigned to Project Mercury, the first manned spacecraft launched by the United States. Assigned a position as a project physician, Marchbanks was stationed in Kano, Nigeria, at one of the 18 tracking stations utilized on February 20, 1962, when Colonel John Glenn and the other astronauts circled Earth 3 times. Marchbanks' role in the mission was to monitor the astronauts' physical well-being by looking at readings of respiration rate, temperature, and heart reaction for the few minutes that they passed overhead. To determine whether they were having heart problems or not, Marchbanks compared their electrocardiograms, ECG, during spaceflight to a set of similar tests taken earlier at the Johnson Space Center while the astronauts were under both normal and stressed conditions. Prior to leaving for Nigeria, Marchbanks had spent more than a year studying Colonel Glenn's various ECG readings. Each time the Mercury passed, Marchbanks recorded normal ECG readings for the astronaut, indicating that the flight was not causing any physiological problems. After this assignment, Marchbanks helped to design the spacesuits and the monitoring systems the astronauts used for the Apollo moon shot. As Chief of Environmental Health Services at Hamilton Standard, a division of a United Aircraft Corporation in Connecticut, Marchbanks was responsible for the human safety aspects of the simulated training for the backpack being built for the Apollo astronauts. Marchbanks spent much of his career studying the sickle cell trait, which differs from the disease sickle cell anemia. In 1983, he was recognized by Howard University in Washington, D.C., for pioneering the initiative that resulted in the Department of Defense re-signing restrictions on the admission of persons with this trait to the Air Force Academy and to the Department of Defense. Marchbanks married Louise Gilkey, and they had 2 daughters. He was a member of the Aero Medical Association and the Society of Flight Surgeons. He died in 1988 of complications from Alzheimer's disease. Citations are in the description.